All right, well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate you joining for the session today. I hope you get something out of it. I was just telling some of my friends and colleagues that HR may be getting a little loose with the definition of pro in ProChat, so bear with the presentation today. Today we're going to talk about a couple things, but first I want to give you a little bit of background about the Entrepreneurship Center and what we do in case you're not familiar. We do three primary things. We help entrepreneurs get started in actual businesses that are generating money in the workplace and raising real investment rounds. The second thing is Mississippi State has over 100,000 living alumni, and they're doing amazing things all over the place. You all know them. What you may not know is that every day we seem to meet somebody in the alumni pool that has built an amazing company doing something we just would have never expected. And so those are incredible resources to connect with students who are trying to build whatever they're trying to build. And we have over 100 ideas every year that walk into the center where there's students and a team that says, hey, we want to build this. And it's our job to figure out, do we have talent that matches with that? And then the third thing is the center executes a number of classes that are short technical training classes. So we have world-class faculty all over campus and in our business school that teach business at a deep level. Our job in some of these classes is just to give surface level knowledge so that they have a working knowledge of the language that goes through. So those are the three areas we focus in. We have a relatively small team. Between fall last year to this year, we have really 3 full-time staff members. Myself, Jeffrey Rupp, who don't hold that against me if you know Jeffrey. And he's outreach director for the College of Business and handles a lot of our K-12 activities in the community. And then Brooke is an office associate. We also have 5 part-time student staff members as well. So it's a relatively small team that has to work with a number of students. So as we talk about 100 different teams, let's just look at a snapshot of what that looks like if you could hit the next slide. So here is just a small snapshot of teams. And so when you think about advancing an idea, we often think of just a sentence on a sheet of paper, but there are people behind these that look very different from all different backgrounds. We have some that are first-generation college students, all the way to some where both of their parents may have started multiple businesses. And whatever it is they're working on, whether it's a golf cart startup or a drone startup to look at cell tower optimization, our team has to be responsive and deliver value to that student. That's a pretty high challenge for a small team. The center's also been growing in recognition. We have an active advisory board, which I'm going to put them on the spot. These 3 individuals serve on the center's advisory board. They're going to pretend like they're not here. As well as a whole host of others that have built this momentum where we're being featured in things like Sky Magazine on Delta Airlines. We had both Mississippi U.S. senators in our center meeting with one of our student startups that's just partnered with Blair Batson to give back to the community. AP just wrote a national story on it that was in the Miami Herald. So we have this momentum that's been growing over the last relatively short few years. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is 3 things. 1, how do organizations get to the point of where we think of them as not innovative? Okay. 2, a short lesson in entrepreneurship, at least how we think about it. And then 3, some ideas that are looking at how you can implement what startups do into the workplace, even in a large organization like Mississippi State or other organizations. So let's start with this picture, which is perhaps one of the most bureaucratic organizations, right? The idea here is that no organization ever sets out to look like that and operate that bureaucratically. Sometime over a long period of time, sometimes short time, they end up becoming this mess where it's hard to do work, hard to get anything done, and in the worst case, where people feel stifled to be there and deliver ideas. So some ways this happens, right? First, past problems patched with processes rather than dealing with them. So we see this a lot, and frankly, we see it at Mississippi State too, right? Where there's been some terrible incident that happened that really was unforeseeable. We call that a black swan event, right? And instead of just taking it for what it is, we say, well, let's design a policy to catch that 0.5% issue that could happen. And so then we end up with all these policies that build and build and build and build. Second is you can't ignore that people aren't machines. They're just not predictable. People have things that happen in their lives that make them have a bad day and they come to work grumpy. Things the opposite, right? They come to work happy and that may make them a less powerful negotiator. So people are people and people have just conflicts like anybody else. The third is you have this incident of fear of lack of control. When you have people who have been in an organization a long time, they start to feel like they understand everything, and if you try to change that, the span of control then shifts. And so it's hard to deal with that. Everybody has struggles dealing with that change of control. And then the fourth is a culture that embraces experience more than outputs. If you start to value some work that somebody has done over the work that they're putting out, that's a dangerous culture that can breed into this idea of bureaucracy, because new ideas then again become suppressed, especially from the people you want to listen to. There's an adage in any doing healthcare or medical devices in entrepreneurship that if you really want to know how the hospitals run, you got to go ask the midnight shift of nurses, not the doctors, and not the hospital administrators, right? Because they all have the idea of how it's supposed to work, not what's actually going on. Same thing applies in any large organization. So let's shift gears for a moment and look at what is entrepreneurship. All right, so here's a list of traits. We had our team inside the Entrepreneurship Center, and some of our entrepreneurs go through and build a list of, all right, when we're looking at an ideal startup team to found a company, what are some of the most important traits they have and as part of their DNA? So I put this up here just for you to kind of take in and maybe self-assess or assess your team mentally of where do you fit in on this. And if you think about, these may apply in the context of entrepreneurs, but they also very much apply for any role in any company. Most of these are things we aspire to. I'll just cherry pick two that really stand out here. The last two are two of the most important ones to me out of this list. Ability to dive into unknowns and figure it out. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And the last one of not waiting for permission to try. So taking a step back then, we know what makes up a great entrepreneur, but what makes up a startup company? You hear that a lot. Maybe you've had some exposure or owned your own business. But let's look at most startups that we've heard about, and maybe one you haven't on the far right, start with a big vision. This idea that we're going to change an industry or change something on a grand global scale. If we think of PayPal, in the world before PayPal existed, their whole vision was to set out to remove cash and hassle and to be able to email money, right? Tesla had the idea where cars should be economically affordable and electric. Whisper, the one on the far right, I'll talk about just in a moment. So even though they have a big vision, they also have to have a very small, focused path that's focused on a particular customer. So if we think about PayPal, who was their first customer? Does anybody know who their primary first target customer was? eBay users. Bingo. eBay had a section of users that were called power users, and they were the ones that had the biggest pain point of how do you do a digital transaction online. Tesla, they're famous for saying that if they could build a sports car and get sports car enthusiasts to buy an electric car, they could sell an electric car to anybody. So they started with the Roadster. If we think of Amazon, Amazon famously now has everything from A to Z on it, but they didn't start that way, of course. They started with books. LinkedIn is a tricky one, but LinkedIn was originally built for HR managers exclusively. And then the one on the far right that I've ignored here called Whisper, that was actually a startup that was founded by 3 Mississippi State graduates through the E-Center. They raised the largest student investment to date, $400,000 last year. And they're sort of the poster child for tech entrepreneurship coming out of the E-Center, because these are 3 students that literally walked off the graduation stage into a funded company and now are selling product all over the country. And they started out with a focused path of Connor, who started that company, worked his way through school by climbing cell phone towers and changing light bulbs at the top. It's a pretty hard way to pay for your college. But in that process, he found the problem of when you're deploying wireless internet and you have to put up a tower, where you put that tower is a really time-consuming problem. And today, they take a bucket truck and they drive around for an hour or two to find out where they should put that antenna. And Connor built a drone where you press a button and it flies around a property and says, this is the point in space to build that antenna. Pretty cool. Big vision, because wireless internet can change the world because of the places where it's uneconomical to install fiber. So again, big vision, small focused path of solving this problem. So we think about entrepreneurship then in the context of this creating an advanced formula or scientific compound, but in reality, it typically looks much more like this. right, from Apollo 13. Just a quick aside, I have given this talk now recently to 2 freshman classes, and nobody in the room of 100 people recognized this scene. So I told them they couldn't graduate from engineering school without watching Apollo 13. But anyway, this is from Apollo 13. They're going in the lunar module, they're running out of oxygen, and the filters won't work, right? So it's a painful problem that a real person has, and it's a valuable outcome at the end. And what we see is in the Entrepreneurship Center, we get a lot of people that come up with a cool idea like this, where we can take a bunch of lines, we have a cool machine that can turn them into boxes. And so the cool thing is we've invented a way to turn a lot of lines into a lot of boxes, and we can do it really fast. Except that the market cares about circles today. So maybe our technology that turns lines into boxes is not very useful, or it is useful, but nobody cares because the market cares about circles. So then here's the equation you come up with. Innovation is the product from invention, or some new creation, times a market that cares. So if either of those are 0 for the folks paying attention to math in the room, there is no innovation. This came from a colleague of ours up at MIT that worked heavily with the program early on. Bill Aulette came up with this, and I just love the way it articulates what innovation actually means. It's doing something new, but it's also something new that people care about. So the thing to take away here is that startups are not just small companies, and a lot of people have that misconception that it's just a tiny company, but startups are doing something very different. They're looking at how do we find something in the world that matters to a market that cares, right? Where a company's idea is to how do we grow that over and over and over. So if you follow me with this, startups then aim to become companies, and so a company is the product of then some new innovation times execution. And I promise this is the last math equation for the presentation, all right? But just to give you a framework of when we talk about what does even innovation mean in the workplace, we're using the framework of doing something new and applying it to a customer that cares. Doing something new, applying it to a customer that cares. Okay, so switching gears to some core ideas, and I'm going to sprinkle in some stories from a startup experience I've had, along with an example of where we've done some cool things in the university. First rule of entrepreneurship is you very rarely make everything internal yourself. You outsource, and so I'm going to outsource part of this presentation to my colleague Charles Freeman in a moment, who's going to share some of the examples that I'm going to share today. He's been intimately involved in. So, first idea, put the right people in the right seats, trust them, and then expect results. Startups know this all too well because there is not enough money to screw up and waste time on people who aren't going to execute. And it's often fairly brutal, right? As you put somebody in, 4 months later, there's no results, you have to get rid of them and find somebody new because the plane is reaching the end of the runway and you're running out of money and time. So putting people in the right seats, trusting them, and expecting results. All right, here's some embarrassing photos from my first company. We started, a friend of mine in high school when we were 16. We started this company called Hilltech where we were doing IT services, and then it turned into doing application design and a product. We eventually sold it 5 years after this. But early on, my business partner in the middle, Will Long, who's now a PhD, got his PhD from MSU, go Dogs, is one of the smartest individuals I've ever known in my entire life. He's a guy where you can give him any problem and he's going to happily solve it. All right, so part of this whole trust and balance we had was that it was very frequent where we'd go into a meeting and I would be talking like, absolutely, we can do that for you. We can do it. We know exactly how we're going to do it. And my business partner, Will, sitting over there thinking, I have no idea how we're going to do this. Now, he didn't say that, but I had faith in him to be able to do that. And he had faith that I wasn't going to oversell or do anything unethical, right? That we were going to have a partnership where, yes, we have to push the boundary and say yes to more things than no, but also that he was willing to be capable to do those things as well. And so this job here on the left, this was a photo from a job up in an attic. We had a situation where we were trying to get internet out to a very remote part of a country club, and we had never done any kind of wireless internet work in our life. We had some ideas of how to do networking. We've had some experience there, but we sold them and had a customer pay us a deposit to do this job based on an idea we have never done. And Will figured it out. It's a great result. Actually today, 15 years later, that network is still running, which is really cool. All right, so that's on the entrepreneurship side of an example where that paid payroll for another 3 months. If we hadn't done that job, we'd had 3 months left to live early on in the company. It's a very important idea there. How do we look at this from inside the university, the same mindset of a trusting team? So last fall we had an announcement that came out from the USDA funded us $100,000 to build our downtown facility called the Idea Shop. And a quick shameless plug, if you hadn't seen it downtown, go check it out. The front quarter of it is a retail product shop filled with items from community members as well as students. So really cool. And the back 3/4 of it is a makerspace where it works like a gym. You come in, pay a membership, and you have access to all these amazing tools to build whatever your heart could desire. So do go check that out. Anyway, so the Idea Shop was an amazing hodgepodge of ideas and people that all relied on each other. And I'll let Charles weigh in just a moment. But something happened here. Years prior, Charles pulled together a team of a bunch of people to write a grant to the same funding agency. And we went for weeks and weeks, pulled together a proposal, sent it in. It was unsuccessful. In fact, we got batted down on some small stipulation we missed. All right. Fast forward probably a year and a half later, and Jeffrey Rupp, our director of outreach, happens to be in Jackson, and he runs into the program officer, the main guy over all of these grants. And the guy says, hey, we've got some money available in this program. Do you think you can turn together a proposal? By the way, we need it in like 2.5 days. So Jeffrey picks up the phone, calls me. Yes, we'll do it, right? We'll figure out how to do this. We put that proposal from that phone call signed through sponsored programs in 51 hours. 51 hours. And those of you in the grant space know that that's monumental. But it didn't just happen because of any miracle work. It happened from a whole host of people, from the phone call with Jeffrey, who's a people person, me, a process person who can put together a plan, the dean in the College of Business, who it's really important, says, hey, yes, this is important. Team, we're going to focus energy on this, and also clears away some of the hurdles, like sponsored programs need some time to do this. Well, let's work harder on that, right? So there's all the management barriers that have to get cleaned out. Now I'm remembering this is recorded. Uh-oh. Anyway, Shana Beckham, who's our grant specialist in the College of Business, is a wizard and also has good relationships with the people in sponsored programs. So when she picks up the phone and says, hey, this is important, she has friends there. Our folks in SPA were very, very responsive. I can't speak highly enough of them. And here's where I want to bring in Charles Freeman, because Charles was an essential part of that project. And if you are keeping score here, Charles started the team the year and a half prior to go for this grant. All right, we applied for it because we had an opportunity to go for it, and we put it in and we were successful in getting it. Now, oftentimes with teams, people would be really pissed off at each other and probably not talking. Charles might have been mad for all of 20 minutes. But when you're focused on who gets the credit for things and not focused on what's the outcome for the team, you end up missing these opportunities like this. There was no way we could have gotten the whole group together. We probably couldn't have even nailed down a meeting to get that whole original group together. We would have missed an opportunity that was a fairly clear win. When a program officer says, hey, I've got money for you, can you deliver? You say, yes, right? So Charles, when we got the award, I called my friend Charles. I said, Charles, guess what? We got this. By the way, you probably didn't know we applied for it. I think Charles was out of the country. And you want to jump in here and share your side of the story? Yes.
So when I come back out of the country, and the first thing I see is the press release on the grant project that we had. And I know before I left, I sent the grant over to them, the first draft. I said, hey, here, just in case we need this, because I know these opportunities are going to be coming up for us. And so I come back out of the country, and that's what I see. And then I start to get texts and emails and phone calls. Did you see the College of Business stole your grant? I can't believe they took your grant. My perception is, I can't believe you got the grant. That's amazing. I don't care my name's not on it. That's not the issue. I can't sign an IAS from overseas and everything. Move forward, move fast. And I know that the first discussion we had was, what's next? What's our next project that we're going to do? It's not about credit. It's not about what you're going to be getting. But I knew that Eric and Jeffrey didn't apply for that grant with the sole purpose of cutting me out and saying, you know what, forget Charles, he's out of the picture. It's more of a, we have an opportunity, we have to move fast, he's going to understand on the back end. And so because of that, we got the idea shop, which was my end goal anyway, was to have a retail space for our students to use.
Yeah, so the idea shop Charles is mentioning is here. He's right. The first phone call that happened when Charles got back was, hey, we got this thing, let's sign a deal so we can have human sciences and the East Center set this up and go. And so in the time we got the grant, which was in August, we had the grand opening of an entirely renovated facility that March where the president was speaking at. So that's breakneck speed, right, on this project. And part of that is because we have a team that trusts each other, that we're all working in the best interest of Mississippi State and each other through the program. So that's overall in the category of putting the right people in the right seats. Again, I mentioned Jeffrey's the people person. He's the right guy for that. I'm the process person. You don't put Jeffrey over that. And then we have other players who are involved that are all a key role in there, but there's right people, right seats, trusting them to do what they're supposed to do, and then expecting results. Okay, so core idea number 2. This is a phrase I have stolen from a friend of mine because it's so true. Mark Scott, who heads our Veterans Business Outreach Center, is famous for using this expression. The customer is not always right, but the customer is always the customer. Customer is not always right, but they're always the customer. What does that mean? So I'll tell a brief story from another startup that has come and gone called Sports Snacks. Did anybody use Sports Snacks at Mississippi State? I'm just curious. That's a little sad. So Sports Snacks was a company I co-founded. What it was a mobile app where you could order concessions from your phone in sporting events, and it would be delivered to your seat. And Mississippi State was one of our first customers. We had it at the baseball field, at the Coliseum. People loved the app. Scott Strickland, when he was here, was famous for tweeting about how long his food took to be delivered. We knew what his wife and children loved at the concession stand, and people would just post over and over and over. And we had this beautiful chart that every entrepreneur covets of how the revenue looked in the early stages of this company, which it had kind of taken that hockey stick curve, which was really, really good. So on the customer being the customer, and though they may not be right, one of the early objections we repeatedly had over and over and over was, well, the cool idea of in-seat delivery is cool, we just don't know about absorbing the labor cost. The venues were really worried about the labor of running food to the stadium. And so they resoundingly said, what about an express line? And our response was always, no, you don't understand. People don't want to leave their seats. It's not going to work. And they said, well, we understand, but what if we set up an express line and see how that works? And this we heard over and over and over. And our objection was always, no, you don't understand. Now, while that may be true, that they didn't understand the vision we were trying to lay out, they are the customer. And what we were telling them is they were saying, hey, we'll pay you if you do this. And we were saying, no, don't pay us because we want it our way. Pretty dumb. This company is no longer a thing. All right, and I have a whole talk on the dark side of Sports Snacks and what went wrong on that. I'm very open about sharing that story because I think you learn the most from things that don't go well. So anyway, but that's an example of where the customer may not be right, but they are the customer. If we look in university land, we see this as well. So the Heron Foundation had a grant solicitation offering of ideas. Last year, the East Center applied to add some program support to the Idea Shop downtown, to fund the Idea Shop, and it was unsuccessful. And what we heard from Heron is they really wanted cross-college initiatives. They wanted to see hands-on real economic development. And so this year, we applied with 3 deans as the PI from Arts and Science, or Arts, Architecture, and Design, College of Business, and that one, yes. We just got notice last month that it was funded. So what does this mean if I'm the East Center director and we had this cool idea? This kind of goes back to team. So we partnered with all these people to get the award, and it came at a cost, right? The East Center is not going to get as much money as we would have done, but we win as a team. So we look at the macro success of how do we make MSU win. We end up with some great results. The customer here was the Heron Foundation, who said, here's what we want, cross-college initiatives, real hands-on. So what we did is we responded with a proposal that addressed their concerns, and it was successful. Core idea 3, move fast and break things. This is an expression my team often misattributes to me. Again, like most of these ideas, it was borrowed and stolen from elsewhere. Anyway, when you're in an accounting department, you probably think this doesn't apply to you. And you would be right. We don't want our accountants moving fast and necessarily breaking things. What we mean is from a process standpoint, though, you want to think about, well, how are we doing things? Are we waiting on everything to be approved 15 times, or are we just moving forward? I'll give you an example. In the same company, also, do we recognize this scene? Yes. Thank you. Okay, so in sports snacks, when we were selling the earliest version of the product, it was a heck of a lot like this from Wizard of Oz. Ignore the man behind the curtain. My business partner, Daniel Payne, he would sit down with a customer who was usually the concession manager, and he would show him a laptop and he'd say, here is our product, Sports Snacks, and what it'll do for you. And Daniel would go and he would click on something, and me, kind of off to the corner where they couldn't see, had my laptop and was quickly changing things. So it made it look like the software was actually working. The software was not working when we were first selling it. It wasn't working. What we did, though, is in those agreements, we would sign an agreement at the first deal. We would sign an agreement to say we will have a working product or we will have the software delivered to you in 4 months. So when they signed the deal, we knew, all right, we have 4 months to build the rest of this thing and make sure it works. There are many, many, many companies that have a start very much like the man behind the curtain. LinkedIn was famous for it. Dropbox, if you're familiar with Dropbox, the first version of Dropbox was a nice video of what they were going to do. They never built the product. They just simply had a box that said, put your email address in and sign up. When you did that, it said, hey, thanks, we'll let you know as soon as it's ready. When they found they had 100,000 email addresses, they said, okay, we need to go build this. That's a lot how many startups are started, man behind the curtain. We had a case of this, and again, I'll invite my colleague Charles Freeman up. There was a Sweet Potato Innovation Challenge, and Charles, I should let you speak more to that because you were more involved in the genesis of that, and then we could talk about the specific course that he and I co-instructed.
So the Sweet Potato Innovation Challenge was a USDA-funded grant project that looked at a waste product in agriculture and how to come up with new products and new uses for it. So I would teach in our product development area in our fashion design and merchandising program. And so we were talking about coming up with new products and how do we integrate it? Could we use things like sweet potatoes in an ag product? Could we create new products that are related to consumerism and consumer products for the market from sweet potatoes, and what could we come up with? And so Eric and I developed this 1 credit hour course that we took a group of fashion design and merchandising students from freshmen all the way up to seniors, and we came up with an idea, and to be honest, we really had that man behind the curtain, we had no idea what we were doing day to day for class. And so first day, we're like, you have a syllabus? I'm like, I don't have a syllabus either. We should probably get one together. And so we weren't quite sure what we were going to do, but we had a vision of where we wanted it to be. You know, and at the end of the day, we wanted the students to have a tangible product. So we set the course up as pass-fail. It was a pass-fail course for students. It was a 1 credit hour class, non-required. The grading criteria in the class was if you had a product at the end, you passed. If you did not have a product at the end, you failed. There's no excuses, there's no middle, there's no B's, C, D's. I really, really tried. We had one young lady, I think about 3 to 4 weeks out, crying in your office, saying she could not figure out this product. She was working by herself, she was all alone. No way she's going to pass this class. She has a 3.8 GPA, this is going to ruin her GPA. And our response was, I'm really sorry, there's no parachutes on this plane. You may want to get back out and start working again. And lo and behold, she shows up with a product at the end. I mean, she made ink from sweet potatoes for ink pens. Phenomenal product. I mean, just a great, excellent product. So that was one of these things where we really didn't know what we were doing week to week. We didn't know what the students were going to be coming up with. However, we knew that we were going to help them, and we were going to be responsive to whatever their needs were. We were going to try to fail as quickly as possible on the types of things that they were creating.
At the end, we had an expo, and this is an expo of all the teams with the projects that were going on. This is a gentleman who's done multiple angel investing in startups that came up because he wanted to see what it was. So we had no idea this was going to even be possible to happen. And every team, right? Every team had a product and a presentation display at the end.
Absolutely.
So, yep. Pretty cool.
Pretty fast.
Okay, so the last idea I'd like to share with you today on innovating in the workplace is this notion of don't wait for permission to try new things. We deal with this with entrepreneurs all the time where it's like they're just waiting for somebody to tell them it's a good idea or waiting for somebody to tell them the path of how to build it. And then you look at the ones that are really successful and they're not waiting. They're not waiting for anybody to tell them this is what you should be doing. They just simply go. Yeah, so these are two, and forgive the anecdote, but two ideas that we push to try to overcome this with some of those. Ideas don't work unless you do. Don't let perfect become the enemy of putting something out there. And the last one here is keep calm and just ship it. There's an expression called shoot the engineer, and it's the idea, and I can say that as an engineer, sometimes engineers always want to just engineer over and over and over. Sometimes you have to actually put it out there and let customers beat it up, love it, hate it, give you feedback back. So a great example of this, if you've seen the Entrepreneurship Center we constructed in 2016 over in McCool Hall, it's this fun, cool glass space with a bunch of TVs and space for students to hang out. There's usually a bunch of activity and writing all over the wall. So this was a planning meeting that happened in 2015. And here we have the dean, Jeffrey, the architect, one of our graduate students at the time, and another architect talking about plans. And they had done nice architectural drawings of what the e-center could look like. And we showed our students what the plans were, and they said, well, we don't like this. And so that was really kind of a blow. But the dean, to her credit, said, okay, well, you all come up with something, and let's see what you come up with. And so they did. This was a meeting where they, not only did they come up with ideas, they all got together, these are all my student workers at the time, and they did a 3D CAD drawing of the space they wanted. They took ideas from that sheet, made a three-dimensional walkthrough, and this picture is in our old conference room where they are showing the dean walking through the new space. And she said, perfect, let's do it. So we got the architects in the room, and they turned the students' 3D model into actual architectural drawings. And many of their ideas, too, were integrated, so it was a real team effort. And the output was this amazing space that we're in that the students designed, largely designed. And if they're the ones using it, why wouldn't we have them do that? But the difference is the dean and our team didn't go and ask the university, hey, is this what we should do? And how do we need to set up a review process with students? And architecturally, do we need somebody talking about all the different things that a building needs to consider? No, we just said, do it. And look what they did. We didn't tell them to do all this. They came up with this magnificent plan, way over the top of what was expected. So I share this with our new hires in the e-center, and I've shared this with past folks that have worked on my startup teams. And I always use this expression, strive to be level 5. Once again, stolen idea, so there's the credit. You can go find the link. But it's this idea of what's the difference between a really a less helpful employee versus a key person. And founders of a startup have to all perform level 5 because there really is no boss. The customer and the board of directors and investors are the bosses. But this idea where level 1 is an employee that says, hey, here's a problem. You should do something about it. Okay, that's mildly helpful. Versus the contrast where I found a problem, figured out what caused it, researched how to fix it, and this is what I did, just to let you know. So this is really, really helpful, especially for our early employees that we're trying to get integrated to say, hey, it's okay to ask permission, or it's okay to do without asking permission. So we end up with this idea of how the title of the talk came today, which was, we've always done it this way, and you've heard that expression over and over. I'm not one to say that that's necessarily a bad thing all the time. There are processes that are good, and we trust the processes, and that trust is a good thing. In the e-center, we put in new processes about 3 years ago that have been iterated a bunch of times, but we trust them that the outcome is going to be good, and that's important. Our whole team is unified around that. But trust, as it says on here, comes from co-creation. If that team doesn't feel like they can influence that process, it doesn't work. They have to be able to feel like they can own that process and change it when they see something wrong. And as their manager, I have to be 100% invested even when I got 1,000 things to do. When they say, hey, I think I have a better idea, I better be open to listen. Because the minute I don't listen, they don't believe in the process anymore. Most importantly, though, that doesn't happen if you don't set a culture that's based around this idea. The gain of success must be greater than the pain of failure. And I ask you to reflect on work environments you've been in where the opposite is true. What I mean is if that employee comes up with an idea that's new and they put it out there and it fails, if they get beat to death over that failure, they will never try a new idea. The converse is, if you create a scenario where they do something and accomplish it and the rewards are lush and you go and celebrate and have a great time, you will find that people are more willing to try things and be level 5. But especially in management, I think it's core to have this in your organization's DNA, of the opportunity of make sure you celebrate even the smallest wins, and when there are problems, you just can't go and take a stick and start beating up all the staff. All right? I love this definition of what is an entrepreneur. Steve Jobs had the quote, "It's more fun to be a pirate than join the Navy." And Bill Ollett translated that from MIT, translated into this idea that an entrepreneur is the combination of the spirit of a pirate and the skills of a Navy SEAL. And what this means to me is, well, lots of things. But first and foremost, and most important, since we're talking about culture of an organization, is that it's simply more fun. Right? It's more fun to be creative and think outside of the box and do all these things we're talking about here than it is to necessarily do the old way or the bureaucratic way of doing things. Now, just to kind of tie a bow back around on this, I understand that wherever you fall in the university, whatever your organization does and whatever the mentality of that organization does not lend one to take all 4 things we've talked about today and just go and say, "Hey boss, I'm going to start moving fast and breaking things." That may not go well. But what I do encourage you to do is you can take all 4 of these components and look at your work, look at the people you work with and the teams you lead and say, how can I install that characteristic that entrepreneurs use successfully into my company? PayPal, that started as a small team, I'm sure is now a bureaucratic mess as well, because that's what large organizations do. They grow up, there's a lot of people involved, they solve a lot of problems with extra processes, and they become bloated. It's just what happens. The president of our angel network uses the expression, he said, "I've worked in companies that get over 50 employees, everybody can be 100% busy all day and no work gets done from the company." So it just happens naturally when a lot of people are together working on something. But do think about the points we talked about, the 4 points we talked about, and how you might integrate them in making your workplace more innovative. And all under the guise of what a startup is doing every day is they're searching for an idea that's repeatable of who they serve. They know who their customer is, know their customer better than the product they're trying to sell the customer, and what value do they provide. It all comes back to what value is that person taking out of whatever you're doing, whether your customer is another person in the university or another department is your customer, or whether it's the student body themselves. Whatever you serve, whoever you serve as a customer, you should always ask yourself, are we providing value and what value do we provide? And then as you grow that organization, think about these 4 things of how you can install them, and I hope that leaves you much success in what you're trying to do. Always available in one-on-one McCool Hall. Would love to chat with you and meet with you or have you involved in our student entrepreneurs. Thank you all.